Salve Latin 2 students, welcome back. Thank you guys for coming to see me today. I wanted to review your last assignment with you, which is exercise C on page 196. We're getting close to our quiz on chapter 34 on the irregular comparative, so I want to make sure you're getting caught up on all this. So make sure you've already done exercise C whenever you watch this, and then you can see how I explain things here, see what you did right, see what you did wrong. Hopefully you learn from your mistakes. There might be a couple things you still don't get after watching my video and everything, so make sure to come into my office hours to see me and to ask more specific questions. If I can help you get ready for the quiz, I'd love to do that. I'd love for the grades on Friday to be excellent. So let's look at these question sentences together. Take a look at your homework and make sure you've done that before you look at these. The first sentence, and I'll point out everything I can think of. Here it is. So this says a small white dog is sleeping in a chair in a garden which is near our villa. So I'll show you my translation. I said a small white dog, parvus canis albus. Notice how I made those all nominative and they all agree they're masculine singular because they all modify the same word dog, which is usually masculine unless you know you're talking about a female dog. In a chair, in cella, in a garden, in horto, both apple of place where. And then right here, the garden which is near our villa, this is a relative clause. So you have to have the relative pronoun agree with garden in gender number, but in its own clause, it's the subject, so it's nominative. So it's masculine singular nominative. That's why I chose qui, okay? The verb of the relative clause is est, which is, and the near is propinquus. Notice how I made that masculine to agree with garden. Now this next part is really important, near our villa. So what case does our villa go into? Well, near is one of those prepositions we've been learning in this chapter that take the dative to complete its meaning, okay? So near something would be the dative case. So notice how nostri villi, I put in the dative going with this word. It's called a dative with special adjective. And then finally, the verb of the entire sentence was the small dog is sleeping. That's the main verb. So I made it present tense, dormit, from dormio, that fourth conjugation verb we learned. So there's a lot here, including a purpose clause. But we see one of the verbs that takes the adjective, that take the dative, which are really crucial on the quiz coming up. Number 2 is the next day, those bad sailors were throwing stones at the consul's house. So compare this to what you got. I came up with postero die illi nautai mali lapides ad consulis domum jaciebant. Now, I'm doing this just like you guys. I don't have a teacher's edition or anything like this that tells me the answer, so I'm translating these just like you guys. So if there's ever, you might see a mistake or something, I'd encourage you to, message me or something to point it out. It could happen. I could have missed something. I'm sure as soon as Fefe sees a mistake, he's going to be feverishly emailing me or something to let me know. But any of you can do that. I encourage you because I could have missed something. I'm human. It's possible. For example, I see here, I just misspelled the word Mali, which should have one I, so Mali. So there might be little things like that. But let's look at the rest of it, see if there's any problems. The next day would be ablative because it's time, it's telling when. So postero die is the ablative time when. Both words are ablative. The subject is those bad sailors, so I'm going to put them all nominative. Illi nautai mali. Again, one I should be there. These are all masculine because that's a pain word. Now they were throwing, so that's going to be imperfect jaciebant. That's the imperfect of that verb jacio. And then stones is accusative because it's the object. It's what they were throwing. Lapides. That's the accusative of that word for stones. It's third declension. And then finally, at the consul's house would be ad domum consulis. Notice how I made this genitive because it's possessive. It's the consul's house, and house is accusative simply because the word ad takes the accusative. Okay. So we see one of our time constructions we learned in this chapter and a lot of good reviews. Some of these things are from previous chapters. So we're kind of always reviewing here stuff we've done before and also learning the new stuff. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Again, make little notes if something doesn't still make perfect sense after watching this, and come see me to talk about those things. Number 3, we don't say this word that much anymore, do we? Oughtn't you to be more friendly to Julia's kinsman? So nowadays we probably say like, shouldn't you do it? But it's basically the same sentiment, right? Now I started this sentence with a none. Why? Because this should sound like it's expecting a yes answer. Oughtn't you to be more friendly? So that's why I started with none. And the verb for ought is debeo, so I said depes because that's second person. And ought you to be, I did esse, which is a complementary infinitive. You ought to be. More friendly would be a comparative, so I did amicior. There's a comparative form. It's in the nominative because it's modifying the subject. and then friendly to Julia's kinsman. Now, if you're friendly to someone, that's another one of those adjectives that takes the dative to complete its meaning. You got to learn those. They're on page 195. They're listed right there. So friendly to the kinsman, that would be dative. So I put propinquis, which is the word that's used for kinsman, in the dative. And then Julia is genitive because she's from possession. But again, this is dative with the special adjective right there. Okay. And if you talk about this infinitive, you would call that a complementary infinitive because deveo takes complementary infinitives, ought to do something. So ought there at number 3. Number 4, I thought was one of the trickier sentences of the assignment as I was doing it. When we attacked the enemy's left wing, the battle was very fierce and many very brave men were killed. So here's what I came up with. Let's do the temporal part first, the when. When we attacked the enemy's left wing, ubi sinistrum cornu hostium opugnavimus. So I did the perfect tense of the verb here. We attacked, and then the left wing is accusative. Remember this word cornu's fourth declension accusative. So that was that weird word that declined us, us, oo. So cornu is the accusative, but sinistrum is also accusative, neuter. It just happens that this word's second declension, this word is fourth. And I made the enemy's left wing be genitive there, genitive plural. Okay, so that's we call it the temporal clause of the sentence when. Here's the main clause. The battle was very fierce. So proelium erat acerrimum. So this is the superlative, and I made it neuter because it's modifying this neuter word here, right? But this is one of those R words, acer, so that's why it's acerrimum and not acrissimum. You got to know the irregular superlative there. Another word for fierce you might have used was ferus, so you could have said ferissimum. I could take that also, but I wanted to practice the R's here since that's going to be something on our quiz. And many very brave men died. So we have et multi et fortissimi, many and very brave. So here we have fortissimi. I made it superlative. And finally, were killed could be either perfect or maybe imperfect subjunctive. So I put interfecti sunt, maybe interficiabantur. You could have also put, again, with all of these, there might be little changes you can make that sometimes can be correct. I'm trying to say them, but you might have a little tweak. Also, of course, the word order might be a little different than what I have here. We know that Latin word order can be switched around. So if your order is a little bit different, doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. But that's how we did number 4. We see the irregular superlative. Make sure to study that for Friday's quiz. Number 5 is this sword is harder than that. It is also longer and wider. I see a little English typo here. This should be harder. You probably saw that. This doesn't really make sense how it's written. But it looks like the Latin I did correctly. So this sword, hic gladius, is harder, es durior. Notice how this is the comparative of durus, harder. Okay, it's also nominative. Now, how do you say harder than that? There's 2 ways to do it. You can use the ablative comparison, which we learned last chapter. That's what I did here, illo. You could have also used quam and just made that be the same case as sword, which is nominative. You could have said quam ille. It's an either or type thing. You don't do both. You pick one. Okay, so I did the ablative comparison here. And it is also longer and wider. Etiam longior, longer, et latior, wider, right? So that's just another 2 comparatives to practice there. Okay, so not too much there, but there's a lot of comparative actually in that sentence, but not as hard. Number 6, if your friends will not be faithful to the commonwealth, they will be the most wretched of all men. So for this sentence, what type of sentence is called if your friends will not be faithful to the commonwealth? So this is called a conditional clause, a conditional sentence. And for this one, if not, you don't just use si to mean if not. We actually, and you don't say si non. We have a specific word we learned, I think this chapter very recently, which is nisi. Nisi is how you say if not. Okay, so this is the conditional part of the sentence. If your friends, and then the rest of it's the main part. They will be the most wretched of all men. So nisi tui amici, your friends will not be. Now, we don't need non because nisi is already if not, so it's already negative, okay? Erunt is the future, will not be, and then faithful is fideles. Now, fideles is one of those words, adjectives that takes the dative, so I put rei publicae in the dative, faithful to the commonwealth. Okay. They will be the most wretched of all men. We need the future again. So erunt. And then the most wretched, I did miserimi. It's a superlative. Since that word ends in R, it's miserimi. And then finally, the most wretched of all men. That would be the partitive genitive, most wretched of all the men. And so I did omnium virorum for the genitive plural here, showing genitive, partitive genitive specifically. Number 7 is which of these girls is most like the queen? So this one's a question here. Which question word was appropriate? I use the interrogative pronoun, which is quis, and then of these girls. So quis harum puellarum. So which of these girls? And then is most like. So that would be a superlative. So we have semilima. Semilima. That's one of those irregular ILS adjectives that add limus to their base rather than isimus. So that would be similis to similis, facilus, and deficilus. This is one of those. That's why it's similima and not similissima. That's incorrect. It's irregular. And then finally, most like the queen. What's queen doing? Well, she's going with this adjective, which is an adjective that takes the dative. So reginae is dative with special adjective. Okay. So quis harum puellarum est similima reginae. Okay, how about number 8? The noble chief was very similar to the king of that country. So for this one, we have princeps nobilis erat similimus regi patriae Ilius. Let's see if it's all there. The noble chief, princeps nobilis, was erat, very similar. Here's our superlative. We just saw this word a minute ago. Similimus. I made it masculine because it's going with this. And then similar to someone, again, that's an adjective that takes the dative. We're seeing those all over these sentences. And so I made the king dative regi. And finally, the king of that country is going to be genitive. So patriae Ilius is the genitive here. So princeps nobilis erat similimus regi patriae Ilius. Okay, hope that makes sense. Again, make your notes of little things. Hopefully I'm explaining them, but there might be something like I can't take your question specifically, so make a note of something that you might have had a question on. Bring it to my office hours. I'd love to talk to you guys and keep in touch with you there to answer questions. Number 9, this work is not very difficult for me, but it is more difficult than yours. This is an interesting sentence. So this work, hic labor est non difficilimus. So this is a superlative here of difficilis, and then difficult for me would be another adjective that takes the dative. So that's why mihi is dative, difficult for me. But it is more difficult, that's a comparative, sed est difficilior, there's the comparative, more difficult than yours, quam tuus. Now, another way I could have said more difficult than yours would be to remove the quam and make this ablative comparison, in which case it'd be difficilior tuo. I just chose to do the other one here, but again, there's 2 ways to show comparison like that. And finally, the last one, Marcus was stronger than Lucius, but Lucius was braver. So let's take a look at this one. We have comparatives in this one. Marcus erat potentior, that's stronger. That's our comparative adjective. It's nominative. It doesn't modify the subject. Stronger than Lucius. Just like what I said in the last sentence, than Lucius could either be quam Lucius or it could just be Lucio. I chose the ablative comparison here, but if you put quam Lucius, that's okay too. But Lucius was braver, sed Lucius fortior. There's a comparative there. He was braver. Notice how I didn't repeat the word erat. Sometimes I do that just for ease here, but just know that the Romans oftentimes, if the verb is implied in both parts of the sentence, like est or erat or something, they would not repeat it. And so I didn't repeat the verb erat here. Okay, so every time we do these English Latin sentences, it is some of the best practice we get in the entire chapter. So do your best. It's okay if you didn't get all these correct. They're tough to get correct. I remember doing these in school very similar to you guys, and I would not get each one of them flawlessly. They're just tough. But chewing through them and working hard on them and then learning from the mistakes is what gets you better at translating and better ultimately at Latin. So thank you for going over these and being careful and conscientious with your work. Come by my office hours. I'm there every day at 10 to 11. I'd love to talk to you guys and bring in your homework if you have questions about it. The rest of this week, I'll be giving you some practice stuff to do to get ready for this quiz, but make sure you're kind of choosing your problems, eliminating, seeing what your errors are, and then bring them into me during my office hours, okay? Quiz will be on Friday, and you can do that anytime on Friday. It'll be like the last quiz where you do it at your computer, and you can do it at your leisure anytime during the day, okay? Hope you guys are doing well, understanding the chapter, and make sure to keep in touch with me, okay? I'll be in touch very, very soon. Walete.